Good morning. I was trying to find any parallels between talking to this august group and meeting with my student body as I've been doing all week. Having watched Johnny try and draw you to attention and actually bring some kind of peace and quiet to the group, and also noticed that nobody wants to sit on the front row, I feel very comfortable and very, very at home. Good morning and welcome to Pinewood Preparatory School, and in particular welcome to Freedom Hall. And I promise, having seen your agenda for this afternoon, that I cannot compete with those activities, so I will be mercifully brief. We're committed here at Pinewood to establishing those global links. Freedom Hall, I think, speaks for itself. This week we have just had our first ever Freedom Week. To give an idea of the activities for the students this week, we have had a refugee from Cuba who came in to address our student body and shared the stage with an American businessman just opening up links into Cuba. We had an incredible experience in the middle of the week with a lady who had survived Belsen and Auschwitz, who came in and addressed our student body. And yesterday we had an Episcopalian minister who had fled the civil war in Liberia. So we are trying to take this idea of freedom and global education to a truly real level for our students.
Next, I think the person who needs no introduction is Robert Wallace, who recently retired. Believe it or not, there was a picture in the paper indicating that he was 70 years old. His children and grandchildren published it. We have to suppose that's true, but he sure doesn't look. Bob is a solicitor for the 9th Judicial Circuit. He's just a terrific trial lawyer and a great guy. And I've heard him before deliver a speech on the 7th Amendment, and it's really, the presentation is one that will make everyone here proud that they're a lawyer and hope to live up to the goals that Bob will speak to about our profession. Robert Wallace.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Let me say at the outset, I'm proud to be a member of ABOTA, and I'm honored that you would ask me to speak to such a distinguished group of trial lawyers and distinguished judges. The jury system is guaranteed to Americans. The right to a trial by jury is guaranteed to Americans by the United States Constitution, by the Constitution of the State of South Carolina, and also by the Constitution of the Confederate States of America. But is it really guaranteed? Winston Churchill said that the three most important documents written in our history were the Holy Bible, the Bill of Rights, and the Magna Carta, the Great Charter. I'm going to begin with a story about the Great Charter. Most of you will remember that King John of England, on the fields of Runnymede in 1215, when facing the armies of the United Barons, was forced to grant to the Englishmen some 62 rights in a written document which he was forced to sign. In those 62 rights was the right to a trial by jury, number 39. As the story goes, of all the rights that King John was forced to grant to the Englishmen, the right to trial jury was the one that concerned him the least. Heretofore, he had simply seized his enemies, thrown them into jail, confiscated their lands, and that was the end of it. Of course, this caused a great deal of anger and even some rebellion. He now thought that with the jury system he would get the same results without getting the credit for it. For after all, he would appoint all of the judges, all of the prosecutors, all of the investigators or sheriffs, and the jury would consist only of his faithful and loyal subjects. To those of you who practice criminal law in the federal courts, Judge Duffy, you realize not a great deal has changed since 1215. As the story goes, the king selected for the first trial charges which he had brought against one of the most difficult barons. And he selected his most faithful judge, his very best prosecutor, his very best sheriff, and he selected for the venue an area of England that was most loyal to him. The trial was conducted in a barn because it, of course, did not have courthouses yet. It was in a small farming area. And after the evidence was presented to the jury, the prosecutor told them in no uncertain terms that not only did the king expect a verdict of guilty, but he demanded that they find the man guilty. The jury went out and they deliberated for hours, till it was almost getting to be dark, and finally returned with a verdict that shocked everyone, including the defendant. The verdict was not guilty. The prosecutor then insisted that the judge send the jury back out again so that they might reconsider their verdict. And once again they were told that the king demanded that they find this man guilty. They went out once again. When they returned, it was after dark, and they brought the same verdict. The prosecutor then insisted that the jury be sequestered, locked out, in the barn overnight, without food, without beds, without heat, so that they might again reconsider their verdict. The next morning, all of the people from the small village came down to the barn to see what was happening. Their man had not returned home. The stock had not been fed. The little village store had not been closed. As they arrived, the judge unlocked the barn and they all went in. And the jury came forward. The judge asked if they had reconsidered their verdict, and the foreman said that they had. He asked for their verdict. The jury was cold, they were tired, they were hungry. But most of all, they were afraid. They had never, ever defied their king. They didn't know what would happen to themselves, to their families, to their property. When the foreman announced the verdict, his voice was barely a whisper. He could hardly be heard. But he said, not guilty. The prosecutor went into a rage, and he screamed and he shouted, he demanded of the jury, you tell me now, when will you do as the king has ordered you to do? When will you find this man guilty? And the foreman stepped forward. In a voice that was loud and clear, he replied, never! And the word went out from that little village, throughout all of England, and in time throughout all of Europe. 500 years later, the jury system came to America with the immigrants on a boat. And in the coming years, it developed in America a special kind of lawyer, a special breed, the trial. Hundreds of years later, a special organization, the American Board of Trial Attorneys, was formed to recognize and to identify the very best of the trial lawyers, the best by experience and the best by skills. I think Theodore Roosevelt could have certainly been describing the trial he wrote, "It is not the critic who counts, it is not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled. Credit belongs to the man who really was in the arena, his face marred by sweat and dirt and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs to come short and short again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. Is the man who actually strives to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasm and knows the great devotion, who spends himself on a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of great achievement. And if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place will never be with those cold and cruel souls who know neither victory nor defeat." To try. You know who you are, John Pope. You know what you are, Johnny Litton. I hope this little story today will remind us all, Brad Waring, why we are. I am concerned, and I believe that many of you are likewise concerned, about the so-called tort reform issue that is being debated and voted upon in America. I'm concerned that the President of the United States and the Congress, together with the governor of our state and our General Assembly, I'm concerned that they no longer trust Americans. They don't trust the men and women who serve on juries to do the right thing. They don't trust the judges appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate or elected by the General Assembly of the state. They don't trust these men and women to do the right thing. They, like King John, no longer trust the jury. I think perhaps it's time to revisit Runnymede, and it won't be the first time. Rudyard Kipling, who died in 1936, revisited Runnymede 700 years after the fact. And this is what he wrote in part about Runnymede and the River Thames. At Runnymede, your rights were won at Runnymede. No free man shall be fined or bound or dispossessed of freehold ground, except by lawful judgment found and passed upon him by his peers. Forget not, after all these years, the charter signed at Runnymede. And still when a monarch lays too rude a hand on English ways, the whisper wakes, the slumber plays across the reeds at Runnymede. And Thames that knows the moods of kings and crowds and priests and such like things runs deep and dreadful as he brings their warning down from Runnymede. As you know, there is no River Thames in America. Who then will bring the warning to Americans? The trial lawyer? ABOTA? If not you, then who? If not now, when? To the new members of the American Board of Trial Attorneys, I tell you this: be proud to be a trial lawyer. Be proud to be the guardian of the jury system in America and be proud to be the person who makes liberty and justice for all a reality and not a slogan. And finally, welcome to the American voters of trial and terror. Welcome. Chairman.
Well done, Bob. I knew I should have followed Bob. Big mistake. Should have insisted for Johnny that I go first. What a great speech. I know some of you have heard it. I haven't. It was delivered by a true master. Bob Wallace stands tall. Why he's retired, God knows, because he's got a lot of fire left in him. I want to thank Johnny, Lyndon, and Pam for all they've done in getting this together. I tell you, anytime I want to invade a foreign country, I think I can get Johnny to organize. When this weekend is over, I'll finally stop getting emails. He sent me one, 6:26 yesterday morning, about 3 pages long with 27 things to do. It made me dizzy to look at it when I saw it at 9 when I got to my office. I am the president this year of the South Carolina chapter of ABOTA, and I've been a member for several years, and it means an awful lot to me to get together. This is a start. We've never gotten together with our brothers and sisters from Charleston. It is a true privilege. I'm going to introduce sort of our chapter to the local Charleston folks. I'm this year's president. Next year, Barron Greer's with us. He's the vice president, he'll be president-elect. Ted Spath, who could not be with us, is the secretary treasurer. On the national board, we have Laniel Chapman, Mark Bike, and Lewis Cromer. And of course, very specially with us today, Reese Williams, the old shad fisherman, is former president of the National ABOTA. He's been very active. He hadn't stopped being active because he's no longer president. He's really meant an awful lot to our chapter in what we do each year, which I'll talk about very briefly. Joel Collins is also a very active member who's with us today, and Joel's going to speak in just a moment about the National ABOTA Foundation. He's a trustee of that. Lewis Cromer is a very active member, and I encourage you to look at this next year. He is president of CBOTA, which is Southeast ABOTA. It's a group that was just formed of all the southeastern state chapters except Florida, and I think 10 or so states, Arkansas and all the rest. And we met at our first meeting in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago, last month. Had a great meeting. Senator Lindsey Graham came and made a terrific speech. I mean, he really is a friend of the trial and law. What did I say? Excuse me. In New Orleans. Great place for a meeting. Great place for a meeting. Our Senator Graham is a great friend of the trial lawyer, and I encourage you to keep that in mind because we really need him up there. There's some people that are talking nonsense about this federal tort reform, and without somebody like Senator Graham there, truly, I'm not sure what's going to happen in 7 minutes. Each year, our chapter has, we try to have an outing in the spring, we have another one in the fall, we have a master's in trial program. We'll tell you briefly about that. Some of you have attended those programs from this chapter, from the Charleston chapter, but it's a trial that's put on, and Judge Hurlow has presided in one of ours, Judge Harwell presided last year. We get lawyers from ABOTA chapters all across the country. Last year's Masters in Trial program was in November. It is really the premier seminar that the law school co-sponsors each year. We've had lawyers last year from California, Tennessee, Georgia, Pennsylvania, New York participate. Each lawyer takes a role, whether it's opening statement or cross-examination of the expert. They get witnesses are prepped about what they say. There's a little bit of a script involved. But last year we had a trial that was really based on a case that Ted Spath had tried twice, hung jury both times. So it was a terrific case scenario. It was a sexual harassment case. And of course the jury is there, is seated, and our presentation. The jury again was deadlocked. So it was a great scenario to see good lawyers at work with a good fact pattern they could work with. And that Masters of Trial program has been held at the law school each year for many years. We preceded by our annual dinner every year where we have our members. We have 94 members now. They come and enjoy the black tie dinner. We usually have judiciary is invited and speakers and whatnot. But that is what we do. Kermit King spoke to us a few years ago. You know, Kermit's an outstanding lawyer, been practicing about 50 years. And he talked to us about a trial lawyer named Francis Hare who wrote a book. Francis Hare is deceased. He has a son about the same day, but he died like 30 years ago. Plaintiff's lawyer in Alabama. And he wrote this book about his reminiscences. And I want to share to you something, and I'm plagiarizing because Kermit plagiarized. I suppose it's okay for me to do so. But he took the foreword out of Francis Hare's book, and I want to read it to you because he talks about the essence of the trial lawyer, the Pentecostal fire of the advocate. And here's what Francis Hare said. There's something different and special about the trial lawyer. You can tell it whenever you go in a courtroom and see any lawyer, old or young, good or bad. If his time comes to stand up and speak in behalf of his client, white or black, right or wrong. Then something happens that's unlike anything else on earth. It's like the touch of Midas that turns dust into gold, or the miracle of electricity that turns a few strips of metal into a glowing flame of light. There's a touch of everything wonderful in the advocacy of the lawyer for his client. In his effort to make the worst appear the better part, or in his effort to defend the right, there's a dash of love in it, and there's a little of the effect of urban risk. There's a little sex appeal, and more than a little magic. I have seen a shabby old lawyer that almost literally slept in the street come to court unshaved and disheveled, and rise before a jury that came to scoff and remained to pray. Every person who has lived the life of a lawyer knows what I mean, and knows that there must be a source of this transformation of personality and power that touches an ordinary person with the Pentecostal fire of an advocate. That's what we're about, folks, and I am proud to be an ABOTA member. And I don't know where Paul Gibson is either. Thank you. We're going to call on fellow ABOTA and Joel Collins to give us some brief remarks about the ABOTA Foundation.
My dad said I was vaccinated with a phonograph needle, so better watch out. That's brief remarks. He also told me something one time when I was a little boy about Charleston. He said there are two kinds of people in Charleston. The kind that don't wear any shoes, and the kind that look at you and make you feel like you're not wearing any shoes. I'm very proud to serve on the board of trustees of the ABOTA Foundation. And I'm here to educate you a little bit about it. My speech won't be nearly so inspiring as was Bob's or Tom's, but I do have some information for you that I hope you will bear in mind. Before I talk about the foundation, I would just like to make one comment about this Freedom Hall. I came in and started in this corner and worked my way all around. And if you haven't done that, I encourage you to do that. It will put goosebumps on your arms. Winston Churchill, who was quoted earlier, also said one time, first we shape our buildings, and then they shape us. And this is a building that I think can and must shape the young men and women who go to school here very much. The inspirational images and quotes on this wall are wonderful. But very few of us have taken an active role in our foundation by supporting it financially or otherwise. The statistics are as follows. Of these 5,940 active members, we only have 511 who have made a contribution sufficient to qualify as a fellow of the foundation. And that is a commitment to give at least $1,500 over a lifetime. If one achieves that level, one is then named a life fellow. And then if you give beyond the $1,500 level, you are known as a senior life fellow. And we have only 113 senior life fellows. And I believe that we're capable of doing much more than that. Please consider doing that. We're going to make it a practice in our chapter. We hope that you in Charleston will consider doing the same. Thank you for allowing me to speak about the foundation.
At this time, we're going to introduce the new members. I'm going to ask John Tiller, the president-elect of the Charleston chapter, perhaps to stand up and introduce the Charleston chapter new members, and ask Judge Herlaw to induct them into the membership.
I think John
Right on the front row, Steve Darling, my law partner, Dennis O'Neill, Alan Gibson, Douglas Pratt Thomas, John Austin, Alan Runyon, Marvin Enfinger, Brad Waring, Susan Rosen is not really a new member. You joined before, I think. Anyway, we had you around. My good friend Dwayne Green here. Dan Spikes, Joel Bailey. Who else we got? George Wallace and my law school classmate John Bassalon. Welcome aboard. I don't know if there's an oath to be administered.
I'll tell you, this oath that you're going to take is not going to take very long. Okay? It's just been handed to me verbally. So if you raise your right hand, you promise to abide by the principles of ABOTA. Say I do. I do. Congratulations. That's the way I like the audience to speak when they're in front of me.
One thing I've not heard spoken of recently that I think is a great thing that ABOTA does. When they opened the Hollings Judicial Center, I happened to be the local chapter president, and I found out ABOTA gives the traditional flags to new courthouses. So I asked Reese when we opened the annex at 85 Broad if ABOTA would give a flag for that courtroom, one of those courtrooms, and y'all did. And I hope there's one in the new Matthew Perry Courthouse in Columbia. If it isn't, then I would urge you to give one. But I want to give some feedback. It's my practice to go in after a trial and thank the jurors for their service. On at least 10 occasions, jurors have asked me about the flag. And one gentleman recently asked me, could he come back in the courtroom and everyone was gone and take a picture of it? And I explained to him what ABOTA is and what it exists for and why they donated the flag. And it's a tremendous thing to do, so I just wanted y'all to know that.
I want to thank you so much for coming. I'm Paul Gibson, for those of you from the upstate that haven't met me, and I'm the president of the Charleston chapter of ABOTA. We're so pleased to have you here tonight to honor one of my favorite federal judges, and the other one of my favorite federal judges is standing here.
You got any more?
There's one right over there.
But we're so happy to have you here, and Tom?
I'm president of the South Carolina chapter of ABOTA this year, and I'm delighted to be here. This is the first time we've ever gotten together with the Charleston brothers and sisters of ABOTA, and it's a great privilege because I had the opportunity as a young lawyer carrying a briefcase for Charlie Porter to watch our honoree try a case, and I mean he tried a hell of a case in 1973. And I've had the opportunity of appearing in court before him, and he tried a hell of a case as a judge.
We wanted to ask one of Judge Houck's colleagues, Judge Duffy, to give a few words.
Thank you very much. I'd first of all, on behalf of the judges and other guests here, like to thank ABOTA for a truly wonderful weekend, and congratulations to these two chapters for getting together and making this historic event come about. I hope you do it often in the future. I'd like to give a very special thanks to Johnny and Pam Litton, who put on a wonderful weekend, and the attention to detail is obvious. Thank you. it's very easy for me to talk about Weston Hout, but he's not always wanting to hear what I have to say about it. He asked me what I was going to say tonight, and I said, I don't know, I hadn't made up my mind yet. But before I do that, I'd like to tell you, Judge Blott wanted to be here in the worst way, and he's conducting a wedding in Hilton Head, and he does funerals for a price also. But he's truly sorry he couldn't be with us. And he wrote a letter, and in the letter, which nobody gave me to present to you, but he told me what he was writing, so I know. He wants everybody in this group particularly to know what a contribution Judge Houck has made outside of the arena that you know he's done, and that is, as the Chief Judge of South Carolina, he is largely responsible for the Matthew Perry Courthouse coming to fruition and being the wonderful courthouse that it is. He put in countless hours with the other branch of the government that manages our properties. I'll leave them nameless. He traveled the country meeting with architects and builders, and he stood up with them. He fought with them and the politicians, and I think the result is, you'll all agree, a wonderful tribute, a beautiful courthouse to Matthew Perry. So I'd like to acknowledge that, Judge Houck, and thank you. He also did the same thing in Charleston with 85 Broad Street. And I think in truth he's a frustrated architect, but he's a very good one. I had the privilege as a lawyer appearing in the judge's court. I never got a chance to try a case with or against him, but you all knew his reputation as a trial lawyer. He was bright, he was aggressive, and he represented his clients well. You also know as a judge, he's the same way in the courtroom. He comes prepared and he expects everybody else to be prepared. I can tell you that since I've been on the bench, he's become my very dear friend. I have the highest respect for him. And as a Citadel graduate, I can tell you that nobody could have done a better job in that case and come out of it with the respect that he did.
Come out of it alive, you mean?
But when Justice O'Connor was in Charleston to speak to the Citadel, she talked about Judge Houck and how difficult that case was and how well he handled it, and that is absolutely so. And the Citadel now has moved on and done greater and better things because of it, and I thank you for that. I'll tell you this, there's not a person on the bench who is more dedicated, more fair, and more hardworking than Judge Houck, and I'm going to stop there because he embarrasses easily. Weston.
You know, you had one of these things in Columbia probably a year or so ago, honoring a group of judges. And one of the judges spoke for 45 minutes. And I thought then, as I feel now, that I should be brief. I appreciate the remarks. Mike, as far as the buildings are concerned, I take great pride in those buildings. But of course, I share the responsibility with Susie because she's probably a better architect than I am, and she had an awful lot to do with those buildings. But the building in Columbia is something to be proud of because it is the only real federal courthouse we have in the state. Charleston, because of the building restrictions, you have to kind of piecemeal how you serve the court. But there we were able to build a real courthouse, and I think it's the only one in the state. And so it is something we're proud of, and I know the lawyers in Columbia enjoy it. I'm going to be very brief. I appreciate you having me here tonight. I appreciate the honor. I appreciate it particularly because it comes from trial lawyers. It was a hard choice for me whether I should be a trial lawyer or whether I should be a judge. I never really wanted to be a judge. And I've looked back on it many times and wondered whether I made the right decision or not because I literally love the law and love to try lawsuits. The only time it dawned on me that I had made the right decision was that when I found out I could take senior status, do half the work and draw the same meager salary that I drew for full-time. And I don't believe any law firm would let me do that. Thank you very much.